Okay, so today I want to talk about how to move to Sydney when you're not a backpacker. Just as a little backstory, so I moved, when I moved back to London from Perth when I was 17, I always knew that I wanted to come back to Australia at some point, but I didn't want to do the whole backpacking thing. I wanted to actually live and work here properly as an adult. So basically I spent 7 years of my life planning the whole move back here. Every decision I made in my life was with this goal in mind. Obviously you do not have to do that, you do not have to spend this amount of time, but just because of my move when I was younger and being forced kicking and screaming to move back to London when I didn't want to, that's just how things worked for me. So basically the way I did it, so I work in the media industry, and I have known since I joined the industry 5 years ago that there is a shortage of skills in Australia for what I do. Now there isn't a shortage of skills to the point where you can just get a visa by yourself like nurses and teachers and chefs can. But there is a shortage to the point that you can easily be sponsored by a company if you work hard enough and you're good enough. So what I did, a year before I wanted to move back here, I started planning it all out, and I also waited until I was at a level in my career where I knew that I could easily be sponsored, which typically is a manager level. Sorry, I'm scratching my arm because I've got this like nasty gross mosquito bite. Ooh. Anyway, so ideally you want to be manager level, although I have seen people at an exec level also be sponsored. But ideally you want to be manager or above. I was senior exec at my last agency. I was there for 2.5 years. And I kind of just got to the point where it was now or never. I was 25 years old and I was like, okay, I'm sick of London, I need a break. Now is the time I need to move back to Australia. So I'm not a spontaneous person at all, as you can tell from the fact I spent 7 years of my life planning my whole life around this one move. But I promise I'm not crazy. But anyway, so I spent a year planning it, and I made the decision to move to Australia without a job and without sponsorship. I had a 2-month notice period at my old agency, so I handed in my notice. I applied for my... Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. So I did come to Australia on a working holiday visa, which is the backpacker visa. So a lot of people, it's very normal to come to Australia on the working holiday visa and then find sponsorship when you get here. So I applied for the working holiday visa in May. It took about 1.5 weeks to come through because there'd been a previous issue with my old visa that meant that they had to like manually look into it. But from my colleagues and from talking to them, theirs got approved from like within a few hours to within a couple of days. So I applied in May for that. I was actually in Antigua on a press trip when the visa confirmation came through, and my friend Claire and I had a little celebration, and did a bit of a happy dance on the beach. I was like, woohoo, I'm going, because I was actually really worried that they would refuse me a visa because of the previous issue, which by the way was not my fault. The volcanic ash cloud in Iceland erupted in 2010 and I was stuck in Australia for 2 weeks without a visa because I was supposed to fly back the day before my old 457 expired. So my old 457 was the one, it was my dad's 457 that I was on. So back in May 2016, my visa came through, and then the following week I got back from Antigua, handed in my notice at work, so that was beginning of June, and then I had a 2-month notice period, so I finished my job beginning of August, and then I travelled through August and September, arrived in Perth in Australia beginning of October, and then I started looking for a job. I personally found a job very easily with an amazing agency. It's literally my dream job. So I now work for a media agency, same as what I did in London, but a rival media agency. And I have 2 clients. So I'm the SEO manager for a very large tourism board. That's a global client. And then my second client is probably the most well-known brand in the world. And that's the APAC account. So that's my job. The interview process, I literally have just like 4 or 5 interviews over Skype from Perth with the guys in Sydney, and then they offered me the job, and a week later I was in Sydney. I then because I was on a working holiday visa, I then stayed on that visa until I passed my probation period. Now when I moved to Sydney, I'd never even met my boss before. I'd never met anybody in my agency before. I hadn't even seen what they looked like, because we didn't even do Skype video. We did Skype like phone call. So they hadn't met me, they hadn't seen me, and vice versa. But I got so lucky. Like, these guys are amazing. I love the team, I love the company. It just worked out really well. So what I will say is, do not be scared to just do things you wouldn't usually do, because honestly, usually I would never like take a job without having met my boss before. But just do it, go for it, go with your gut instinct is the most important thing. Just go for it, do it, and it'll be fine. So because I was still on working holiday visa, I had a 6-month probation period. I'm sorry. I had a 6-month probation period, and then at the end of that, they applied for my 457. My probation period actually finished like 4 to 5 months in, instead of 6 months, and so they applied for my visa in April 2017. Unfortunately, they applied for it the week after the new rules came in. So now, instead of the 4-year 457, I have a 2-year 457, and then they can renew it after 2 years if I want to stay here, and if they still want me there after 2 years. I hope so. So obviously it completely depends what industry you work in, but I think there's so much information out there on people who move to Australia for backpacking and for a working holiday, but there isn't actually that much information on moving out here by yourself as a professional. And also that's one thing that I really hope I can provide with Say Hello, is a resource and guides and advice on moving to Australia from London when you're not a backpacker, you're not a 20-year-old who wants to work in a bar and go travelling around Australia, because that's not why I came here. I came here to I always wanted to come back. I came here to have a new experience, get away from London for a bit, further my career, have a completely different experience, the opportunity to work in a completely different market to what I was used to. Working in Australia and APAC is completely different to the UK. So yeah, that was just why I came over here and how I did it. I found it easy, and I know other people that have also found it easy because they are nurses or tradies, and they've been able to get a visa very easily because of that. Obviously, if you don't work in an industry where your skills are needed, it's going to be a lot harder, and in that case you will just have to get the working holiday visa, come out here and see what happens. But there are plenty of companies that are willing to take people on who have a working holiday visa and not a 457 or permanent residency. It's just a bit harder. So for example, when I was looking for jobs, no clients and no actual brand would employ me because they won't sponsor you. So I had to go agency side. Even though I've always worked for an agency and I love agencies, it just limited my choices of the jobs that I could apply for, because at the start of every application for a client. So like, for example, if I was applying to Qantas, they would be like, no, you don't have the right visa because we can't sponsor people, so you have to be an Australian citizen or permanent resident. Whereas obviously with the media agencies, it's a lot easier because they're used to applying for visas for people. So when they apply for mine, they use KPMG to do it all for them as their immigration specialists, and it was the easiest process ever had in my life. Like, it was easier than applying for my working holiday visa. I literally just sent them all this information and they just did it all for me, and I didn't have to worry about anything at all. So it was super easy. But moving to Australia as a professional instead of a backpacker honestly just depends on your industry and how niche you are. But especially in my industry, in the advertising industry, media, it's full of Brits. Like, half my office are British or European. It's crazy, but it's also amazing because it makes it easier to move here and then have all these people who have been in your situation. So yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. I just kind of wanted to talk about my experience moving here as a non-backpacker on a backpacker visa and then getting here. Yeah. And then also when you do move here, you'll need certain things. So you'll need like a tax file number. I was very lucky that I had mine from when I was last here, so I didn't have to worry about that. Bank account. So some banks won't allow you to open a bank account unless you have a 457 already. If you are here on a working holiday visa, then the best banks to go with are Westpac or CommBank, because they have special, like, they have bank accounts for migrants. Also, I love CommBank. I've always been with NAB for like the past 10 years, but I got a CommBank account 6 months ago because NAB have a really, really terrible online banking and like mobile banking thing, but CommBank, they have this app and it's literally amazing, like the best banking app I've ever used. And I have a lot of bank accounts in England and Australia. So yeah, and then also when you're looking for somewhere to live, it's weird having to explain to people that you're on a working holiday visa but you're not a backpacker, and that you do have a proper job with a good salary, because a lot of people don't understand that and they're just like, what, are you lying, like what? But yeah, so just be prepared for people to question why you're working on a working holiday visa and not a 457. Just explain that you just came out here on a working holiday and that your company are in the process of applying for a 457, and it will be good. I'm trying to think of anything else, like other issues that I had. Oh, credit cards. You can't apply for a credit card until you have a 457. So if you're still on a working holiday visa, don't even bother applying for one, because it will ruin your credit rating, as I experienced. I was very lucky that I have an Amex in the UK, so I called them up and just transferred it to an Australian one. But if you're on a working holiday visa, you cannot get a credit card here. You have to have a 457 or permanent residency. So wait until your 457 comes through and then apply for one. Because even though my credit rating is amazing in England, and even though it's now building up again with my Australian Amex, because I didn't know that, and because I sent off an application and then it got rejected because they were like, you don't have the right visa, I now have a really shit credit rating in Australia, so I now can't get another credit card. So that's really fun. So yeah, just a warning, do not apply for a credit card if you're here on a working holiday visa. And I think that's it. If you have any specific questions, leave them in the comments, drop me a message and I'll be happy to answer. But I can't think of any other questions right now that I had when I moved here. But that might just be because I'd done it before and I had a lot of things set up anyway that I didn't really have to worry about it. But yeah, okay, I hope that helps. Bye.